So this is the webinar. We'll be looking at how to save money on your cloud infrastructure, learn about some of the tools and tips, and get some questions answered that you may have. I'll rephrase that. It's not my first webinar. I've done lots of webinars for other people. I've done webinars for Microsoft, other partners as well. We just haven't done any for ourselves, which is a bit weird, but we're doing that now. So a couple of quick introduction slides, just one about us and then some more about the problem itself. So we are an Azure solution partner. We've been building Azure cloud platform since 2011. Hi, Melanie Manchester. We're building platforms since 2011, and we've completed a lot of best practice designs and deployments. There's also training as well. So I've got training sessions on the Microsoft partner website as well that I've done on kind of Microsoft cloud adoption best practices and stuff as well. So we design, deploy, and then manage the Azure cloud platforms for our customers. The reason why many people haven't heard of us, I think that's changing slowly, is we kind of work away in the background for larger Microsoft partners, and we kind of come in as their infrastructure delivery partner, as a specialist to do the kind of the infrastructure stuff. So kind of we work behind them. So our customers, some of the customers don't get to see us, but we do have quite a few direct customers as well. And some of those customers here, I mean, we've got plenty. These are just a snapshot, so you might have heard of some of these. We do build kind of high security environments as well for people like National Highways, and quite a few NHS trusts in there. We have done like Simply Health, which is a healthcare organisation, some also private banks and building societies as well. So we've got some good experience building, very secure environments. So today's agenda, we'll look at the cost management problem. How does it come about? What are the typical scenarios that we see? Then we'll look at why and when do we need to look at saving costs. Then we'll look at some pricing options, estimations, tools and tips. And I've saved another bonus one, which I just thought of this morning. I've put that on at the end. That kind of, if you get that one right, is going to blow all the other tools and tips out of the water. So there's a lot of ways you can save money, but if you do this one thing at the end, we've seen that gives you the not just a massive saving, it gives you loads of other benefits for performance, your users are happier, etc. But we'll come on to that in a bit. Okay, so the cost problem. Typically what we see is organic growth of the platform. So people start using the Azure platform. They'll start putting resources in. They want to test a few things out. There's no one really responsible for the platform. So a team has a go at deploying something, and then the organization says, oh, we need this new system. Let's put it in. We need it by next week. Let's go bang something in there. And they don't really think about many of the things that they should be thinking about, such as security as well, which is quite worrying. They don't think about security. They don't think about costs. They don't think about administration of that. So things can get quite out of hand. You repeat that a few times, which is what happens, and things get very much out of hand. Your access control gets screwed up. Your security is wide open, and your costs kind of can go through the roof. And all because they haven't got the proper guardrails and standard operating model. How are they going to look after this thing? And one way to help combat that is to look at something called the CAF, which is the Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. In there, so there's a short code to it. There's quite a few links in this thing, so I can send these slides through as well. So just message me afterwards. I'll send you slides through. So aka.ms/CAF. That is basically a set of guidelines and best practices that Microsoft have put together, working with partners and customers on the best ways to do things. And as part of that, they talk about strategy, planning, readiness, migration, adoption, management, governance, security, the whole works. In there's a lot of documentation about cost control specifically, but also around managing your environment as well. So, things like building a cloud center of excellence, for example. So if you've got a large company, what are the different roles that people will need when you're managing your cloud environment? So you can have your technicians, you can have your governance people. So how does it all fit in? Who's responsible for what? They've got matrices and things like that for you to use and templates. So it's a really useful tool. It's massive. There's so much stuff on that. I've kind of done a 1 or 2 day course on this thing for Microsoft as well. So it's a bit of a beast, but if you go through it, I think on one of our YouTube videos, I've gone through it on there as well. So for example, here's the organization element, cost conscious organization. So how do you build that structure around your teams to help focus on costs? So that's the CAF, aka.ms/CAF. Look at all the best practices. So there's a lot of guidance in there. Okay, why and when to save costs? One question is, why should we save costs and when should we do it? So what you want to do is look at saving money by optimizing your workloads and reducing wastage as well. So we don't want to just save costs just for the sake of it, because if you're just saving costs for the sake of it, what are you giving up and what are you compromising? So if we look at things like cost versus reliability versus performance versus security, if you just say, right, we want to reduce the cost of everything, are you giving up some reliability? Are you giving up some performance? And most of all, are you giving up security? So you've got to find that balance. Maybe look at the risk profile as well of your workloads. If it's development, test kind of thing, you can be quite ruthless with cost savings, especially if you don't have any confidential actual production user data in there. Doesn't matter so much, and if it's properly isolated, of course, versus just chopping down costs and then your systems are not reliable because you've taken away high availability, for example. You take away a lot of the performance, so the users get frustrated, and then you risk your security as well, and then you have a data breach. So what you want to do is balance all those things. So don't just save costs just for the sake of it. Look for where there's waste and look for where you can optimize. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so some of the tools that are available. So we've got the Azure pricing calculator. Let me know if anybody hasn't seen it and would like to see a demo of that. I do have a video on that as well on our YouTube channel, but if we've got time, then we can go through that as well. So things like reserved instances. So you can reserve resource usage in Azure, and that applies to several resource types, not just VMs as well. And you can kind of save up to 62% if you commit to like 3 years worth of that resource. You can split that out by month. I'll show you an example. And there's also something called savings plans, which are similar to reserved instances, but they've got a lot wider scope. So reserved instances, you kind of pick a SKU or pick a SKU type for VMs, for example, and you can then kind of exchange within that plan, and it only applies to certain SKUs within that range. With saving plans, you can go a bit wider, so they're a bit more flexible. They don't give as much savings, and I don't believe you can cancel them or anything at the moment. Savings plans, they were going to allow you to. They were going to stop cancellations on reserved instances. I think they said July this year, but I just checked this morning and it says they're not going to charge for cancellation. So it's as it was. You can set up reserved instances, you can cancel them, you'll go back to normal pricing, you're not tied into it. And it says, what did it say? Until further notice. So it's just going to stay as it is for now, which is good. We've got something called spot instances as well. So you can save up to 90%, it says, and it depends. These are just little bits of compute that you can use for doing small jobs, but the platform can just take them away at any time. It's kind of, if they've got some spare capacity, you can use them and the platform can take them away at any time. So you've got to be careful what you use them for. We've got spot instances, hybrid benefits. So you can save up to 40% on if you've got licenses already. So if you've got, say, Windows SQL Server licenses, you are already with software assurance from your license provider, you can use those and bring them into the platform, and you'll save around 40% from that. We've got auto-scaling, so there's a little slide about that as well. Azure Advisors as well, something that sits in the background and allows, and it gives you information about your platform. We'll also give you information on where you can save money. It'll look for resources that are kind of not sized properly as well. So that's a good tool. We're not demoing that today. And there's also automation where you can create your own automations using Azure PowerShell runbooks to do various things. We've got a couple of examples of that as well. Okay, so here's a pricing calculator. So there's a URL for it there. Yes, there is a video here. So, I mean, if you can, if you'd like to, subscribe to our YouTube channel there, just put at LANet Ltd. You'll see a bunch of videos in there. One of them's about cost savings and stuff already. So we've already recorded that. There's a good walkthrough of the pricing calculator as well. What that gives you is a good idea on how to use a pricing calculator, as well as some of the things to look out for and some of the gotchas in both in the pricing models and also in the pricing calculators and things to look out for. Have a look at that video there. Subscribe to our channel if you can, and the demo will show you how to use it, all the different types of resources, give you a kind of a realistic, how to get a realistic view of what your spend is going to be, and give you some examples of using the latest versions as well. As another tip there as well. So if you got a VM, for example, using a version 2 versus using a version 5, you'll have some kind of savings there as well. So it's all another tip is to kind of stay on the latest SKUs of these things as well. So check that video out, and if we've got time at the end, we can have a quick look around the pricing calculator as well. I believe that link will work even without the ENGB as well. It'll automatically put that in for you. Okay, any questions on that one? If not, we'll move on. Okay, so an example of reserved instances. So say you've selected a VM type. This is your pay-as-you-go pricing per month. This is so. Let's say we want 10 of them. You're looking at around that price per month, and then we can see the savings plans. In this case, you can save up to 32% with savings plans and 62% with reserved instances. So if we look at so this is a reserved instance actually. So 1 year reserved instance, you save a couple of £100. You go for a 3-year commitment, you're saving about 410 quid per month. So there's some decent savings to be made with that as well. So if you've got some workloads that you're going to be using over a long period of time, or resource type, then reserved instance is definitely a good way to do it. And as I mentioned, there's higher savings in reserved instances than savings plans, but you don't get the flexibility. So just you've got to think about which one works best for you. In most cases, reserved instances work quite well in terms of cost saving anyway. Okay, there's also a blog. If you look on our website, if you look at the blog, lanet.co.uk/blog, find the one with this image on it. We've got an example of real world cost saving. So we had a large customer in the States. They were spending a hell of a lot, to be honest, probably over $1 million a year in Azure. We put some reserved instances. We put 40 of these, 15 of these. So they had a cloud environment spanning Europe, US, Asia. And then we put some reserved instances for them, kind of saved them around $250,000 a year. So yeah, they saved quite a lot with that one. So it goes into detail in that blog article. There's a case study as well. That's kind of shows all the automation stuff that we did for them as well. So that might be interesting for people if you want to have a look. So yeah, lanet.co.uk/blog. See all that stuff on there. Okay, cloud adoption framework guidance. So this we're talking about policy-based guardrails. So there's things we can put into place called policies in the platform that can control what people can and can't do in the platform. Things like resource tagging for visibility. Now this image here is from the CAF, and it talks about the different phases of your cost controls. You've got optimization. Make sure you're always looking to optimize your resources. Use automation, balance performance and security, as we mentioned earlier. I would add reliability to that as well, or resilience. Visibility, how do you understand what is running in your platform? Make sure you've got clear tagging policies, proper access control, and proper resource organization. And accountability, clear and realistic budgets, clear communications, and also I would say, clear accountability and defined roles for who's looking after the environment, and all that together with your guardrails. And I'll show you an example of that in a second on what that looks like as well. So it's kind of a process taken from the CAF. So um, one example here in terms of policy guardrails is so this is the cost management center as well. So you can see all your costs in there, and you can use this to filter. Let's say you want to filter by tag. So you can, if you've tagged everything properly, like we talked about, you can tag by cost center, owner, department, whatever you want to use. And then you can filter and look at the tags across your whole environment based on those tags as well. As your policy, we can use to restrict certain types of resources and also the sizes. And we can also use policy to inherit things like those cost code tags, for example. So if somebody builds a resource and doesn't put a cost center code in there, we can inherit it from the parent object. So we always have to make sure the parent objects got that resource tag assigned to it. And we can also, audit where that's missing, or, automatically put that in as well. Things that we can do to help with costs. So let's say you're using a Synapse workspace, for example, or a VM or a database, we can say specifically only these kind of sizes are allowed, like in our landing zone, they call it, which is our core platform. We only allow the general compute, and we only allow like 4 core servers. We don't allow the high performance machines. We don't allow the SAP NVIDIA machines and things like that by default. Doesn't mean you can't use them. It just won't let a user go in and start putting those expensive 128 core machine in, because they can, if you don't put any guardrails in. And what I've seen it happen to customers. People have gone in and spun up a massive Synapse workspace, or SQL pools inside Synapse. Massive. Just leave them running. The next week they've got a $5,000 bill just for running it over the weekend. And that's why you need to use Azure policy and those kind of guardrails to kind of stop that kind of thing from happening. Okay, so that's where kind of an example of the Azure policy to put those guardrails in to help manage those costs. Just quickly to go back, if you did want to let's say you've got a project that says, okay, now we need a massive data warehouse, we want to build a massive machine or a massive Synapse in there, you can do that. What you can do is create an exception. So you'd go through change control, it would all be done correctly. Allow an exception in this resource group or for this specific resource, so that is allowed to be larger than our standard ones. So what we're saying is we're blocking things happening by default. So your IT teams, your security teams, etc., know if something outside of the boundaries that you set needs to be put in place. They have to go through the proper channels, and then you can put them in. So it's not blocking it completely. It's more control, having that control guardrail of your environment. Okay, auto scaling. We talk about things like there's other things like when you start getting to AKS and containers and all that kind of stuff. But at a high level, you've got things like VM scale sets. So if you need a VM, for example, to do a specific thing or run a specific application, provided we can run like that and it can run under a load balancer, you could use a VM scale set. Same with Azure web apps as well. So what we can do is we can trigger how to scale it. So we can scale out, which means adding more instances. So you'd add another VM to that VM scale set, or add another web app instance to your Azure web apps when the load becomes high. So you could do it. There's multiple ways you can scale these things. So it could be by a queue as well. So a more modern way of doing your applications is if you've got work that needs to be done by your processes, your VMs or your web apps, you'd put that work into a queue, and then your web applications would monitor that queue and process them accordingly. And then you could say, if the queue gets so big, spin more web apps up, right? That kind of decouples that the waiting time from the user to the application directly, and it'll just work through that queue. And if you're not using queues, you can schedule by time. You can also look at the CPU usage and memory usage across your whole set of instances. If it reaches a certain level, then scale out. And don't forget to tell it when to scale back in as well. You can also set minimum and maximum. So don't ever scale out more than 20 instances for example. So we're working with a customer at that. At the moment, they're scaling out to about, I think they've gone just beyond 20 now. But we need to work with them. So we've just started working with them and we're looking at right sizing them to start with and then scaling out as they need to. So there's lots of ways and different rules and triggers that you can use to scale out those things automatically via the rules you put in place. Okay, if there's any questions on that, feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, automation. So Azure Automation is a tool in the platform that we can use to run jobs, and typically we use PowerShell runbooks, and there's lots of other ways to do that, but automation is a good way to do it. And we can schedule tasks. So one example where it's probably for that same customer, the previous one in this case, you can schedule a database to resize. So in the case of, let's say, a SQL PaaS database, platform as a service database, it's a managed thing. You can't go switch it off and save cache. What you can do is resize it. So we had a task we knew during the day. It was a retail customer. During the day, they have a lot of usage. So we scaled that database up during the day and scaled it down during the night. And that saved them, well, probably about 50% because or more, because it wasn't the full 12 hours. So it was probably about 8 hours in the day. It was at a larger size. In the evenings, early morning, it dropped down automatically. And you can do that via automation. You can't kind of do that in the platform itself. What you can use is something like one of the newer serverless options. So if you use in terms of SQL, you could use that. So you've got the provisioned and serverless options in the new vCore model. And what that does is allow you to pause that instance. So if you're using a SQL Server database and it's getting a lot of traffic, it will continue running. It will also scale up and down as you need to. If you're using the provisioned instance, it will always stay at the maximum, the minimum value they've specified. So you continue paying for it. If you use a serverless option, it will actually pause it and you'll stop paying for it. You still pay for the storage that's there for all the data in the database, but the compute part is quite expensive. So if you use the serverless option, you can set it to idle and pause after, let's say, an hour of somebody or people not accessing, or your application not accessing that database, and that can be a good way to save money. Your application needs to be able to handle that as well, because it can take maybe a second or less than a second to wake back up in the morning or whenever it's a request is sent to it again. So what you want to make sure is your application can handle a bit of a retry logic on there as well. So it might just hold that user there for a second and then wake the database up and continue working. What you don't want to do is not get a response back and just fall over in a heap, which we also see. So retry logic and serverless with your databases is a really good way to, again, save more money and have that auto scaling option. But with this standard model, you can automate using PowerShell and automated scripts yourselves as well. So, here's the bonus question and the bonus tip. So what we see a lot of is people throwing hardware at the problem. And what that means is they'll make their machines or databases a lot bigger than they need to be when they're not addressing the actual issue. In a lot of cases, you may have an application that's not written properly, has got bugs in it, and it's just very slow. So instead of throwing hardware at the problem, fix your applications and fix the bugs inside that. And the most common thing we see is poor database setup and suboptimal databases is what we see. So we see large databases because they've got no cleaning jobs. There's no housekeeping on that database. They're storing, they don't ever delete anything from there. And the whole thing slows down because they're not re-indexing, they're not rebuilding or reorganizing their indexes. They're not thinking about query optimization. The database design can generally be a lot better than what we see. The data in there is fragmented. So even if the application has deleted something, that data is the spacing, that database is not optimized for writing new data in there. And there's all kinds of space in there. And again, because the indexes are not rebuilt or reorganized, you can have all kinds of issues with that as well. Data retention, as I mentioned, is another big one. People store years worth of data, which they may or may not need. If they don't need it, they should get rid of it. Not only does that slow your databases down, it's also a security risk. If anybody does get into your database, um, they've got access to all that data. Now, if you were never using that data, you should have got rid of it, because now they've got several years worth of data that you didn't even need to be storing. So that increases the security risk as well. We've all seen what happened with Ashley Madison. If anybody's watched the Netflix special, absolutely brilliant on how negligent they were. We could do a whole video just on that, but we won't go into that. It's quite topical. Yeah, using databases for reporting versus transactional. So we see a lot of transactional databases where they're trying to process orders, process this, that, and the other, while some people are actually trying to run queries for reporting against the same transactional database at peak times. That's not generally a good thing to do. And that's where your database design comes into play as well. Ideally, you would split your reporting from your transactional stuff and make your reporting database optimized for reporting. So OLAP type design rather than OLTP, so online transactional processing for your database versus online analytical processing. They're completely different designs. What people try and do is do it all in the one transactional database, and that can cause massive issues with performance. And then what happens? They increase the specs of the servers and the databases, hoping that will fix the problem, and it just adds more costs and doesn't always fix the problem. You can usually fix these things by optimizing your database. Another thing on there, I could go on about this for a whole day, but I won't, is statistics as well, updating your statistics on those databases. So the query optimizer knows the state of your database, knows where to look and how to find that data quickly. So yeah, that's kind of all we can say on that, but that is a massive way where people can really save some cash by optimizing their databases. So that's that one. That's a big one. Just had Ian join. Hello, Ian.
Hello, sir.
We just almost finished, but that's cool. I've recorded the whole thing as well, so I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel. So this kind of last bonus tip was about, optimizing databases. We see a lot of people wasting resources and just throwing horsepower at the problem instead of optimizing their databases, cleaning it, doing any housekeeping and those kind of things. But we'll catch up with you later anyway. Okay, so that brings us, I think that's the last one on. Yeah, so that's kind of the last one on the cost saving tips. If I want to just take you through an example project, what that might look like. So in terms of what this is kind of a landing zone. So what we tend to do is we have a remediation process, a review and remediation. So we do a review of a customer's environment. Are you wasting costs anywhere? Do you have the correct guardrails? Do you have the right access control? Is everything structured correctly? Have you got the tagging in place, etc., etc.? Have you got monitoring and alerting, which we didn't even touch on? Budgets, you can set budgets and set alerts on those things as well. Those can work out really well. So all that kind of core infrastructure with the guardrails, what is there, what's missing, is it up to date? And what we do is provide a remediation plan, do the remediation for the customers, and then do the gap analysis, prepare the correct landing zone, put everything back into the latest Microsoft best practice landing zone structure, including all the governance and guardrails, access control, etc. Deploy that, work with the users on getting that implemented, and then we can then transition to manage and support and look after that environment and make sure it's kept up to date as well, because Microsoft changed the policies, they update their policy packs, and we make sure that's all up to date. We make sure your security is up to date as well, so we look at all the security scores, your compliance and your governance scores. We look at that every month, every week, to make sure nothing's out of step there. Any recommendations we bring to the customers and discuss that with them and make a plan to put those recommendations in place. But yeah, it's kind of just to show you the process and how it works. And so in summary, yeah, we believe in doing what's right for the customer, not necessarily what's best for the vendor or Microsoft or us. So we just want to make sure the customers have got the right platform. They're not wasting money. They're not got any security vulnerabilities in their platform. So that's kind of what we're all about. And sometimes I even point them to other providers, say, look, we don't even have the capacity, or this is not in our specialist area, go and talk to someone, but get it sorted. And any call to action in here. So we are offering a free health check at the moment, so we can generally check within the first 5 minutes. This doesn't look right. This is an issue. You can save costs here, but that's just there. If you want to book a call, just go to the contact page on our website, lnet.co.uk/contact, or drop me a message on LinkedIn or whatever you want to do, and that's perfectly fine. We've got that free health check May to June this year. And a favor, if you could follow us on our LinkedIn page, that's where we post most of our content. We also create a lot of terrible videos on YouTube. They're not very well made. We try to put a lot of content and high value in there. We're not experts at making videos, but we have a good go and we have a good laugh trying to make them. So follow our YouTube channel if you can, and that would be awesome to see you on those platforms, and follow us on our LinkedIn page. So yeah, and I think, yeah, that's it. So thank you, everyone for showing up. It's been really good to, see so many people turn up. I didn't think anybody would, but it's been really good. Yeah, so feel free if you've got any questions, anything you want to add, or was it useful, was it not? If I'm using past solutions, so a question from Mohammed, if I'm using past solutions like web app, functions, Cosmos, is there something I should actively look at to reduce costs? There's several things you can do, Mohammed. One of the things is to have a look at Azure Advisor. That will also give you a quick view. If it's spotted anything, it will tell you, these functions could be sized differently. Web apps, even Cosmos DB, it'll be able to see. It'll look at the performance, the usage of those platforms. You could also look at the metrics on how it's being used, and then just make sure you've got the right scaling options enabled in that as well. You can also unmute your mics as well, guys, and just speak. We're not on LinkedIn's platform now. We're on our own team, so we can do whatever we like.
All right. Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it
Cool.
does. I am using Advisor as well, so
Okay.
that's cool.
Yeah.
One more thing, I have another question. In terms of production and dev environments,
Yeah.
you have a recommendation on what is the most cost-effective solution to maintain a dev and production environment? And is staging slots in web apps something that you would recommend as one of those things too?
Good question. So our general recommendations are to completely isolate dev and test and production, obviously, with different role-based access control. So that's from a security perspective. In terms of architecture, it depends kind of what it's doing, but you can generally, as I think I mentioned in one of the slides, is you can use a lower SKUs for your dev and test, and you can also kind of use automation scripts to kind of resize those dev and test environments as you need to. You could even blow them away on a night and recreate them in the morning using, bicep scripts or Azure DevOps or something like that. So I would say use them just when you need them. If they don't need to be running 24 hours a day and you're only testing 2 days a week, then blow them away if you can, and then just recreate them. So you have it scripted and automated. So I want to run a test. I'm going to click this button. My dev environment's going to appear. I can run my test, and then it will disappear after a certain amount of time. That's probably the most drastic but most cost-efficient way of doing it.
So would you recommend it be like a tenant separation?
No, definitely not.
Subscription
No.
level, right?
Subscription level, yeah.
Cool.
Don't have multiple tenants unless you really, really need to.
Okay. And why would you say that?
It's just Microsoft's best practice. Microsoft recommendations don't have multiple tenants. It adds a lot of management and complexity. What you can have is have a look up Canary management groups.
Okay.
Right. So that's another way that Microsoft, again, it's taking it a step further than you might need, but take a look at Canary management groups. It sets up a whole structure of management groups and their subscriptions underneath it, one for production and a whole new structure of management groups and subscriptions underneath that. And that's useful when you want to replicate your infrastructure as well. So you may have I could quickly bring it up, maybe. So under landing zones, basically, you've got management groups. You've got a management section called platform, right?
Yeah.
And inside there, you've got your connectivity one, for example.
Yeah.
Now, what you might want to do in that case, if we look at our standard management group setup here, there, you would keep that same tenant, but replicate this whole management group structure here. So you'd have a non-prod one over here.
I see.
And that's useful for environment, and we do see that where customers want to have a separate, let's say a separate VPN, separate firewall, separate application gateways, etc. And even they may even have a test domain, and it's best to split that out properly that way. But it is taking it to the next level, whether you know, you've got to get the balance right as well of cost and administration of that going forward, because you're going to then have 2 firewalls, you're going to have 2 application gateways, for example. So that increases your cost, but your standard way of isolating it is by subscription, for sure.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I mean, that is currently the way I'm thinking of doing it too. Pretty much done most of it.
Okay.
Follow the CAF as much as possible. So
yeah,
I guess that makes sense. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. I've got a YouTube video on management groups as well. So it goes into great detail on management groups, and maybe we'll catch up with you later as well. Suraj, thank you for joining us. Sorry if you had issues with the LinkedIn connection. So we said that I sent you a message on there. So we have recorded this whole thing as well. We've just gone through most of the slides on the cost savings and stuff. So I'll make sure you get a copy of that. I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel as well. By the way, back to my YouTube channels for those that have just joined. Feel free to, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel here as well, YouTube at LNet Ltd, and I'll put this webinar on there as well. And if you can follow our company page, you'll see us on there. We post all kinds of useful stuff and some silly stuff on there as well sometimes. So feel free to connect with us on there. Anyone else got any other questions, anything they want to discuss, check, ask, or just tell us if the webinar was good or bad? Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining then. If there's no other questions, we'll close it there, and keep an eye on our YouTube channel. I'll upload this to that thing shortly. And thank you again so much. Thanks to everyone that joined. Really appreciate it. It's been really good to see you all.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks everyone. Cheers, Mark. Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.